porrei una domanda al responsabile per il dialogo sociale europeo, banche, per conto della Federazione Bancaria Europea, al dottor Jens Thau. E la domanda che voglio porre a Jens Thau è la seguente. Spero che Jens stia ricevendo la traduzione. Perfetto. Quindi formulo la domanda in italiano. Nella riunione precedente a questa, durante la quale un'interlocuzione molto interessante aveva iniziato a svilupparsi con alcuni tra di voi in quanto rappresentanti imprenditoriali, abbiamo colto in particolare due primi importanti punti di condivisione da voi espressi rispetto alle proposte che vi abbiamo fatto in tema di rinnovamento e di riscrittura di alcune parti della direttiva europea sui comitati aziendali europei e in generale delle direttive europee per il coinvolgimento dei lavoratori, e cioè due punti di condivisione importanti. Il primo, la necessità che le direttive europee in materia di coinvolgimento dei lavoratori debbano essere in grado di recepire i cambiamenti avvenuti e di aggiornare la cornice di regole esistenti, continuando a garantire l'importanza del dialogo sociale nelle varie geografie dell'Unione Europea. Secondo punto di importante condivisione con voi, in queste stesse direttive le definizioni di informazione e di consultazione sono difformi e disomogenee tra di loro. Ed è quindi necessaria una riscrittura o comunque un intervento teso a coordinare e a razionalizzare tali definizioni, affinché il dialogo sociale in tutti i paesi dell'Unione Europea rappresentati dentro lo stesso gruppo transnazionale si realizzi in un quadro di certezza giuridica e di chiarezza degli strumenti da utilizzare e degli obiettivi da condividere tra partner sociali. Ci potete confermare questi due punti di condivisione e ci potete proporre un percorso di massima per svilupparli insieme con voi come rappresentanti sindacali e come comitati aziendali europei? Grazie.
Thank you very much, Mario, and good morning to everyone in the round, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this very important roundtable regarding the subject of EWCs. What Mario pointed out, indeed, are points he and I, but also together with Uni in the social dialogue, we have discussed for many, many years. And of course, we come from the banking sector and the challenges the sector faces, and we see that. For a long time, the rules regarding European Works Councils only not really fully reflect the needs that at least the banking sector has regarding consultation on the international, on the European level when it comes to groups that are pertinent in more than one member state. And the reasons are manifold why we see these challenges that we have. One, of course, is that already on the national level in the banking sector, there are various models of employee involvement following national traditions and rules and regulation that have to be adhered to. And then these national regulations on employee involvement, of course, have a much longer history than European Works Council. So in every case that comes before the European Works Councils, usually the question is how this is brought into the environment of existing national legislation. These interfaces between the European regulation and the various national legislations is, to say it mildly, far away from optimal, but really warrants decisive improvement. Because what we see is, in order to make European Works Councils effective, we have to make sure that they have an area where they can operate that is not merely an addition to the national level. And from this understanding comes our discussion to see what value can we add on the European level. And Mario has just indicated two very important points. We see from the very different regulations that we have on the European level that no one took the time to think this idea through to the end, but rather on some kind of a project basis. Rules were enacted that follow some kind of an idea to have a European representation in order to, if you so like, mirror what is happening on the European level. As all of you who work with European Works Councils on a practical and day-to-day level know, is that the directives are the one thing, and the other thing, of course, is the work that is done in the respective or concrete, if you so like, enterprise. This can vary from one another a lot. And of course, as water always finds its way, also the actors on the European level in the respective enterprises find ways in which they manage their own idea of an added value of a European Works Council in the organization. And so from this point of view, I think it is important to acknowledge that the freedom to find the solution that suits the enterprise best is of the utmost importance in our view. And I think that is a view that is seen by both sides. Of course, depending on what you look at, whether you see, to organizations where it does not work well, or where you see the vast majority of organizations where the European Works Councils has a very, very good way of operating. On this depends your assessment of what a law or what a legislation or what a directive should do. We are in the banking sector, I think, in the majority of the idea that it is a better thing to give the opportunity to find a fitting model without too many rules in the regulation itself. But of course, we see that this is not true for every sector. But speaking for our sector, it is definitely something that we stand for. So the changes in work organizations that occur, I think, in the speed they occur in the banking sector can hardly be put down in a directive. Because the moment the directive will be enacted, it will already be outdated. And in addition comes the fact that work organization also is a matter of how can I say, competition between banks, competition for employees, competition for customers and clients. So it is something that goes back to the heart of what the enterprise stands for in the market and vis-a-vis their employees. So we feel that the idea of a one sector all approach that of course the directive has to take leaves out the necessities that a highly digitalized, a highly project-oriented banking sector requires also from from the way a European Works Council can work. And this is why I think so many rules and regulations that the Works Councils give themselves in the banking sector are somewhat different of what the law prescribes. And I think this is really the first point that Mario addressed, and that cannot be stressed enough, that we advocate for a greater flexibility, a greater trust, of course, in the people that are on the European Works Councils. Bank employees, of course, are highly educated and highly valued employees with a lot of ideas and a lot of high potential that, of course, are able to organize the work in which other sectors might need more assistance from the law. But for the banking sector, we, of course, are more looking at the freedom that we need in order to have these new forms of work also reflected in the work of the European Works Councils, so that it can have an effect in such a setting, which is very, very necessary. And regarding the second question, I think this is also a very important point that Mario has risen. Because of the patchwork landscape of directives dealing with EWCs, it is not only not a harmonized legal framework, but also in some points, well, I would not say contradictory, but let's put it this way, hard to always align one with the other. And this leaves out the difficulties that we have with aligning the European Works Councils with the national traditions of employee involvement. But only to talk about the European level, reminding you of what we talked about in the last physical meeting in Rome, talking about, keeping the role clear. Why is the European Works Council not a different supervisory board when it comes to timing of issues? Why is the European Works Council more free in assessing and using its liberties when discussing with the employer than, for example, a supervisory board can be? So these strengths, I think, are important to put forward. And for this, we need a framework. And in this respect, I think it is important to analyze really where service sectors, and especially service sectors at the forefront of knowledge work, like the banking or other financial industries, what their desires, what their needs for a well-functioning European Works Council is. And I think this, for all of us around this table, even if it be a virtual one, is very clear that improvements are necessary to that respect, and that we have in some organizations a well-functioning European Works Councils, not because of the directives, but because of the rules that the Works Councils give themselves, despite of what is said in the directives. And I think this is a very important point. And so in these respects that I mentioned, that of course take account of what Mario has said, I think we are on the same path forward with a lot of agreement in these aspects, to see that we need to go forward. Well, and on a more practical basis, and with this I will conclude, how can this be done? Well, I think, of course, the best way to do this is within the framework of the bank's sectoral social dialogue on the European level, being it a topic that is directly located on the European level. I do not mean this in the sense of exclusivity, as you can see, because we are now not in a room of sectoral social dialogue and still we talk about it, and this exchange I include. But I think what could be an important next step is that we take the results of these findings, as has been put down in the 4 bullet points by FISAC CGL, as has been put down by the representative of the WC in UniCredit, and also at least parts of it, what has been put forward by Philippe Dansement, to see, on this basis, how we can elaborate further. And this really should be our next step, that we take this and the documents that will follow from this very important seminar in order to come back together in whatever the pandemic allows us for a kind of format, and elaborate further to come to even more concrete next steps, also possibly even a joint lobbying vis-a-vis the European legislator in order to bring this point across, which is so important for this sector representing knowledge work. So with this, Mario, I would leave it for the moment. Of course, open for question whenever possible.